Have you ever wondered what the tribes of ancient China were like? A lot of people think that wild and fierce tribes were only found in places like the Amazon. But actually, ancient China had its own warrior communities that were just as feared as any group in the world. Let's dive into these fascinating tribes. Originally, the region we now call China was a diverse patchwork of hundreds of ethnic groups, each with its own traditions and way of life. In the east, there was a tribe led by Tai Hao, also known as Fu Shi, while the north and west were home to the Rong and Di tribes. On top of that, in the north, you had the ancestors of the powerful Xiongnu and Xianbei, known for their toughness and combat skills. But there was one tribe in particular led by the legendary Huangdi that had even bigger ambitions. They dreamed of conquering the vast central plains. The history of ancient tribes is fascinating, especially when you see how their names and leaders shaped their identities. Often, tribes were named after their leaders, and when a chief passed away, the tribe's name could change to reflect the new leader. A great example is the Huangdi tribe, whose name hints at a connection with the bear totem, suggesting their origins in the mountainous regions of Zhuolu in the northwest. Originally nomadic, the Huangdi moved to the central plains, adopting a rugged lifestyle focused on gathering and livestock herding. The story of the Huangdi is filled with conflicts and conquests, like defeating the Yan tribe and driving out the 9 Qiuli tribes, events that solidified their presence in the heart of China. These victories became legendary, filling the Chinese imagination with heroic figures performing superhuman feats. At the same time, culture along the Yangtze River was also booming. Around 5,000 years ago, the valleys were the cradle of early rice farming pioneers, the Hemudu and Majiabang tribes. Over the centuries, these communities evolved into the Liangzhu culture, which inherited and expanded on the agricultural and cultural knowledge of the Longshan traditions from the Central Plains. By the 9th century BC, northern tribes like Guwu and Yue began to deeply integrate into Chinese cultural and political patterns, marking a period of cultural blending and evolution. These tribes, by mastering the Chinese language and adapting to the complexities of local politics, became skilled in advanced military strategies, pushing their societies to new levels of development. With a strategic location between marshes and waterways, they excelled in shipbuilding and warfare, and their military prowess was celebrated in epic songs. They were also known for their metalworking skills and advanced manufacturing techniques. Over time, the descendants of these tribes emerged as influential figures in Chinese politics. Their military campaigns, especially those against the state of Chu, became the stuff of legend. The rivalry between the states of Wu and Yue, which lasted for 30 years, ended with the defeat of Wu at the hands of the king of Yue, Gujian. The rise of Qin Shi Huangdi and the subsequent unification of China under his rule led to the incorporation of Wu and Yue territories into the vast Qin Empire, which expanded all the way to Guangdong. In the annexed territories, administrative districts were established, and local leaders were integrated into the state system, submitting to the authority of Qin officials. Later, during the Han dynasty, the Yue territory was divided into Non-Yue in the south and Min-Yue in the southeast. Non-Yue, under the leadership of Zhao Tuo, briefly rose to power before being subdued by Han forces, marking yet another chapter in China's expansion over local cultures. Just like waves gently shaping the coastline, Chinese settlers gradually moved into the lands of the Yue, pushing them little by little into less fertile areas and mountainous regions. Unlike the nomadic tribes of the Xiongnu and Xianbei from Central Asia, the Yue were never a major threat to China, living quietly under the influence of the vast empire. These communities mainly focused on agriculture, leading a peaceful existence. While the women tended to the rice fields, the men worked the land. Over time, most of the Yue assimilated into the Chinese ethnic group, contributing to China's rich cultural diversity. Today, their descendants primarily live in the provinces of Zhejiang and Guangdong, embracing and adapting to Chinese culture. However, some groups, especially those connected to the Tai Kadai peoples like the Shan, Muong, Dai, and Zhuang, have preserved their distinct cultural identities. They've stayed true to their ancestral traditions, with some even seeking refuge from Chinese rule by migrating to areas inhabited by the Mon Khmer, keeping a living link to their historical roots. The Shaolin warrior monks capture the imagination of many, blending Zen with the art of war, a tradition that dates back to ancient times. The global fame of the Shaolin monks owes a lot to the film industry and icons like Jackie Chan, who turned the Shaolin monastery into a symbol of Chinese martial arts. While Hollywood often romanticizes this reality, the essence of the warrior monks is rooted in authentic and historical practices. The Shaolin monks have developed impressive martial arts skills over the centuries, going beyond simple self-defense to become part of a spiritual path that seeks to unite mind and body. The demonstrations of breaking bricks or wood are more than just feats of strength. They are testaments to discipline, focus, and mental control. This is the core of the Zen philosophy they practice. This tradition began with Bodhidharma, an Indian monk whose teachings were crucial in shaping martial training at Shaolin. He not only prepared the monks to defend themselves from threats like wild animals and bandits, but also integrated martial practices as a form of meditation and physical conditioning, especially useful in the harsh mountainous conditions of the region. As attacks on monasteries increased, the Shaolin monks also evolved their techniques, adopting weapons like staffs and spears to protect their sacred spaces. The courage and fearlessness of the Shaolin monks turned them into legendary icons of martial arts, known for defending their community against external threats. The fascinating lives of these monks, though different from Hollywood portrayals, continue to captivate and inspire many. But you might be wondering about the fate of the tribes we mentioned. Let's dive in further. In a broader context, an ethnic group made up of various tribes, known as the mysterious hill dwellers, existed between civilized lands and harsh steppes. Stretching from Hami in the west to Xing'an in the east, these tribes, referred to by the Chinese as Rong or Hu since the 7th century BC, were notorious for their fierce warrior spirit and lived on the borders of Zhou. These people, who some Russian historians believe to be ancestors of the Tangut clans, inhabited lands ranging from the upper reaches to the middle stretches of the Yellow River and the Sichuan region during the Iron Age. Interestingly, they had a matriarchal system where women were in charge during the day, and the men followed their orders. This system only began to change with the arrival of Sinicization. The history of the Rong, known in ancient Chinese as aggressors or barbarians, is both fascinating and complex. These people are considered the ancestors not only of the Tangut, but also of certain Mongol groups and the Xiongnu. Ancient Chinese artists often depicted the Rong and their Tangut descendants with physical features that blended Mongoloid and Caucasian elements, especially during periods of major territorial expansion. The Tangut, descendants of the Rong, absorbed much of the cultural heritage of ancient tribes and Tibetan nomads, including an adherence to Zen philosophy. In the 11th and 12th centuries, they became a significant power, capable of challenging China itself. Their warriors, renowned for their courage and apparent insensitivity to pain, formed the backbone of a powerful state, Xixia, which rose from the ashes of earlier civilizations and came to dominate vast regions of the Middle Kingdom. However, at the height of their power, the Tangut experienced the decline common to empires. From fierce and resilient warriors, they became a more complacent elite, less prepared for the demands of defense and expansion. Over time, the lack of real military challenges weakened their ranks, making the empire vulnerable to younger, more ambitious conquerors. By the 13th century, the fall of Xixia was complete, marking the end of an era for the descendants of the Rong. Under Genghis Khan's leadership, the unified nomads didn't just take control of China. They also wiped out the Tangut rulers, who were descendants of the Rong warriors. This event marked the return of a time full of major changes and tribal wars in the region. Way back between 1766 and 1122 BC, the Shanyin state, or Zhongguo, thrived as a center of power. Like many other ancient civilizations, it eventually lost its grip to the Zhou tribe. The kings of that era, known as Wangs, starting with Wu Wang, would grant land and titles to their loyal followers, a system that, unfortunately, also led to corruption. Back then, military training was intense, with men dedicating years to becoming skilled warriors, while women handled household tasks and food preparation. Over time, the Zhou state weakened due to internal conflicts and tribal battles, breaking up into smaller fiefdoms. The wars were so brutal that, according to reports from the time, cities and fields were littered with bodies after the clashes. In 260 BC, one of the most brutal events in history took place when Qin troops captured and buried alive about 400,000 Zhao warriors in Changping. The Qin's military strategy was impressive, combining the energy of young soldiers on the front lines with the solid defense of seasoned veterans, creating an almost impenetrable shield even when the battle seemed lost. The Xiongnu, a group of warrior nomads from Asia, first appeared in Chinese historical records in the 5th century BC. Their constant raids led to the construction of several defensive fortresses, which were later linked together to form the iconic Great Wall of China. In the 3rd century BC, under the leadership of a powerful Shan Yu, the Xiongnu unified a vast tribal state stretching from present-day Mongolia to southern Siberia and from Manchuria to the Pamirs. Their army, made up of 300,000 mounted archers, was known for its exceptional mobility and skill, posing a constant threat to Chinese chariots. Although the Great Wall was built to keep them at bay, it alone couldn't fully secure China's northern borders. To deal with the Xiongnu threat, the Chinese turned to both diplomacy and marriage alliances, blending the two cultures in an effort to establish peace. During the 50s BC, the vast Xiongnu Empire was going through a period of internal division. Some of them accepted Chinese rule while another group moved westward, reaching Central Asia. Years later, in 93 AD, an alliance between China and the Xianbei faced off against the Xiongnu in the Battle of Yibai, and won. Later on, in 155 AD, the Xianbei commander Tian Shihai delivered a decisive defeat to the Xiongnu, breaking them into 4 distinct groups. One integrated with the Xianbei, another settled in China, a third moved to Tabragaite and the Black Sea, and the last group migrated further west, reaching the regions of the Volga and Don rivers. It's interesting to note that as they mixed with Turkish and Ugric tribes, these Xiongnu are believed to have given rise to the Huns in Europe. And yes, descendants of these ancient tribes still exist. In the isolated valleys near Lugu Lake at the foot of the Himalayas lives the intriguing Mosuo tribe. Known for their matriarchal society, women are the central figures in this group. They not only make decisions and manage money, but they also own the land, which is passed down from mother to daughter. This system stands out, especially in contrast to other traditional Chinese practices that still include arranged marriages. The Mosuo practice Zohun, or walking marriage, where girls as young as 13 can have relationships with lovers who visit them discreetly, without the formal ties of a traditional marriage. To signal that a nighttime visitor is present, the Mosuo hang a hook on the door where the visitor's hat is placed, avoiding any misunderstandings. The children born from these nighttime visits are raised within the mother's family, with support from close relatives. In these large families, multiple generations live under the same roof, and the matriarch, the oldest woman, is respected as the head of the household. While the women handle the more strenuous tasks, the men usually take on lighter duties. In the last century, attempts to assimilate the Mosuo into mainstream Chinese culture failed, largely due to the region's geographic isolation, which used to require a week-long journey to reach the nearest city. This separation has helped preserve the unique characteristics of this community. Today, the Chinese government sees the Mosuo as a potential tourist attraction. Specifically in Luoshui, Mosuo culture has been partly adapted to draw in tourists, often in ways that don't truly reflect their lifestyle. However, in more remote villages, they continue to live according to their ancestral customs, passing down their values and practices from generation to generation. Nowadays, in modern China, it's rare to find tribes or ethnic groups that still maintain distinct lifestyles. Government policies favor cultural uniformity and discourage practices that deviate from modern standards. As a result, many traditional communities have been pressured to modernize and adapt their ways of life.